Firstly, I want to address your point about the right to resist. Let's basically split it up so we can understand this particular point. In terms of international law, there's a principle called jus in bello, that is a conduct of resistance, but has to be in accordance with the laws of war. There is a protocol which many scholars that support the Palestinian right to use armed struggle in pursuit of self-determination. That is a resolution that was passed by the United States General Assembly. I'm sorry, by the United Nations General Assembly. And what that basically states, many scholars have argued, based on international law, that Palestinians, and we're not talking about Hamas, but that Palestinians in general, in the context of the occupied territories in Gaza and on the West Bank, have the right to resist under international law, including armed resistance. Now, the conduct of such resistance has to be in accordance with the laws of war. And that basically would imply that attacks on Israel can, in principle, only be limited to military targets. That's allowed. You can go in and kill soldiers in terms of international law, but attacks on Israeli civilians are, of course, prohibited. Now, whether it is the Palestinians who have the right to resist against Israeli occupation, or it is Israel that has a right to self-defense against Palestinian violence. But the important point, the important aspect in the whole genocide that you'd call it, or the conflict, that it is entrenched right in terms of international law that can be invoked, that the Palestinians have the right to resistance, and such resistance could be targeting and killing of civilians. Now, having established that on the particular let me try and park that, because there's different aspects I want to unpack with you. That's one point. That's a given. So the first point I want to ask you before I move on, do you accept that principle, the Palestinian right of armed resistance? We're going to deal with October 7th, but do you accept that particular principle in terms of Protocol 1, which is a declaration of friendly relations, as well as several resolutions by the United Nations Security Council and General Assembly? Do you accept that principle?
Yeah, except that there's armed resistance on the part of Israel or any other country. But right now, Palestine is not a country.
No, I'm talking about the right of Palestine. No, you're failing to understand my point before I move on. Do the Palestinians, in terms of international law, have the right to resist? Because if you are
Absolutely
saying no,
not. They're not a country.
So basically, then there's no basis and justification for what you're saying, because Protocol 1, which is a declaration on friendly relations, as well as resolutions of the United Nations Security Council and General Assembly, have made mention of the fact that a community or an ethnic group that is under illegal occupation has the right to resist an armed struggle. This is an established point in international humanitarian law, and you've just denied something which is established in international law. Now, you are saying they're not a country, but the international law entitles and obligates those that are living under illegal military occupation, which the West Bank and Gaza is, for the right to resist. Now, this is a situation that is there. My question to you is, how are you saying something which is basically non-existent in terms of international law, when international law lays it down? All international law puts a caveat on. It says that when there's armed struggle and when there's a violent struggle, that violence should only be limited to military targets and Israeli installations and not to civilians. And we're going to unpack that in relation to October 7th. But how can you say that Palestinians have no right to resistance because they're not a country, when international law, in fact, gives all occupied powers the right to resist? Answer that question, please, Matt.
Well, I hope you'll let me answer, but Palestine is not a country. If anything, you could argue that it's a civil war, because Israel is the overseer of those areas, even though they're disputed territories. Israel, hang on, let me talk. You can't interrupt me. I'm in the middle of a thought. You got it. No, you can disagree with me after I finish talking. You can disagree with me after I finish talking. You can disagree with me after I finish talking. You need to let me talk. You can't jump in when I'm talking.
But not when you make falsehood. You have to
let me finish my thought. then you can
Okay,
disagree with me.
okay, I'll let you finish your thought. Make an accurate thought, because we need to go on to the next one before once we establish this.
I'm
Go
telling
ahead.
you that Palestine is not a country. It's not recognized as a country yet. They have made their issue, and they want to be a country. There's no ethnic part of Palestine. They're Arabs, I guess you could call them Arabs. It's not an ethnic cleansing. There's no ethnic identity in Palestine. They have no history. You go back to Palestine to what? Back in 1920, when they're called Palestine by the British mandate. So that's where Palestine started. So there are a recent, you know, the way I understand the disagreement between Israel and the Palestinian territories is that they are, you know, they want a autonomous rule, and right now Israel is saying no. So it's a civil war, if anything. There's nothing that says Palestine has any history in Israel other than when it started in 1920. You can go ahead and respond.
You're conflating the issues. You're conflating the issues. But before I respond, I just want to clarify something with you. What's your definition of a civil war? Do you know what a civil war is?
Yeah, it's a disagreement between internal country. Go ahead.
Yeah. Do Palestinians living in the West Bank and Gaza, do they have Israeli citizenship?
They can.
Do Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza have Israeli citizenship? Because Israel denies them citizenship. They're not Israeli Arabs.
Israel's not allowed to go in those territories.
No, you said, I'm just asking
Israel
a
is
question.
not allowed to go into Palestine.
Okay.
Israel's
Okay, let me give you an analogy. I'm going to give you an analogy, Matt. In the United States, you've got those who support the Democratic Party and those that support the Republicans. Let's assume those that are supporting the Democrats, they've got the right to vote, and those that support the Republicans, they've got the right to vote, fight against each other and create anarchy. Would you agree that that would be a civil war?
Sure, it would be.
Right. Now, apply that situation to the occupied territories. The Palestinians in the West Bank and the Palestinians in the Gaza are denied the right to citizenship by Israel. Israel will refuse to give them a citizenship. How do you call that a civil war against non-citizens of a country? Explain that to me.
I will
Because you call
explain
it
it
a
to you.
civil war. No, you said it's a civil war.
They have
So
the
I
right
gave
to
you
be
the
part of
analogy the
Israel.
United States. Explain to me.
The Palestinians could, instead of being their own country, could say, "Hey, we want to be part of Israel. We want to be Israeli citizens." And if they wanted to do that, they would be welcome into the fold of Israel. Israel is a pluralistic
They won't.
country.
But they won't. They won't. You don't understand the point. Firstly, you've jumped to too many things. But
Well, they will. They will. They took over Gaza. You know, Egypt.
Israel has stated clearly that they won't.
Let's go back.
If they do,
Let's go back. Let's go back.
Let me finish.
Who ruled Gaza? Will you tell me? Who was in charge of Gaza in the before the British mandate?
No, hold on a second.
You know, Gaza was ruled by who? What country?
Hold on a second.
Egypt. Egypt.
I'm here to teach you. You're not here.
Egypt owned Gaza.
No,
Okay.
Egypt owned Gaza, right?
No, Matt.
Egypt owned Gaza. Is that true or false?
What we need to do, guys.
Tell me, did Egypt own Gaza? Yes or no?
No, they didn't.
Did Egypt own Gaza? Yes or no?
No, they didn't. No, they didn't. They were under administrative control.
Egypt ruled Gaza. They did. Read the history. Read the history book.
Matt, are we going to talk over each other? Because I gave you time and I want to
Yes, you can say crazy things if you want.
You can't answer this. See this as an educational session for once. Because I'm here to teach you, not the other way around. You're not teaching me anything. You are even confused on basic subject. You don't even know what a civil war is. So let me just explain this point. You can't call what is happening in Gaza. Firstly, it takes us off the point, but you can't call what's happening in Gaza and the West Bank as civil war, because the population in the West Bank, that is the Palestinians, and the population in Gaza are both denied citizenship by Israel in terms of the Israeli legal system. That's a fact. So both those populations that are living there, unlike the Israeli settlers in the West Bank, don't have the same rights as Israeli citizens, and Israel will never give them citizenship, because if they do, it would essentially mean that the Jews will no longer be in majority, and if they get citizenship, it will mean one man, one vote, and Israel may possibly cease to exist as Israel. You'd now have probably Palestinian leadership presiding over Israel and the Palestinians. So basically, Israel is afraid to give them citizenship. So it can't be a civil war. But that takes us away from my initial question to you. My initial point, and I want Mohammed to share the screen, Mohammed. I've just shared the screen so that he knows the aspect of armed resistance. I'm bringing you something called Protocol 1 of the Geneva Conventions. If you can see this on the screen, it's frequently cited. It basically says that this refers to the preceding paragraph, which includes armed conflicts in which peoples are fighting against colonial domination and alien occupation, and against racist regimes in the exercise of their right to self-determination. And the authors of that particular article, referring to the wars of natural liberation that had accompanied decolonization, the Israeli occupation of Palestinians, and of course the racist apartheid South Africa. So alien occupation refers to territory conquered by a state but not yet annexed, and was inhabited by a different ethnic group, which is the case of Israel, because Israel, even the founders of Israel, like David Ben-Gurion, like Theodor Herzl, all define it as a settler colonial state. All. There's no, so if you're going to deny Israel as a settler colonial state, the very founders of Israel were bold in stating that is a settler colonial state. And the other point is that the Israeli legal jurist, Yoram Dinstein, he even basically makes the point, that whilst international law doesn't prohibit the acts of resistance, it doesn't prevent the occupying state from penalizing those who resist, which means that aspect is absent. But even he was willing to concede that Palestinians have the right in terms of international law to resist. So I want to clarify one thing for you before I move on to October 7th, is that will you now recheck and re-educate yourself that the right to resist is not a right that is given to a country. The right given to a country is probably the right to self-defense. The right to resist, in terms of Protocol 1 of the Geneva Conventions, is a right given to any occupied ethnic group, any group, whether you call them Palestinians, whether you call them Arabs, if they're in that land and they can trace their particular ancestry before 1948 and they've been under settler colonial occupation, they've got the right to resist in terms of international law. And the Protocol 1 of the Geneva Conventions and the general resolutions, the resolution of the General Assembly, has given Palestinians the right to armed resistance. The only caveat that they put is that they should not target civilians, which is, of course, understandable, that your resistance should be against Israeli military infrastructure and Israeli military objects and Israeli soldiers for that particular matter. So now I'm coming back again to the question before I move on to October 7th. Will you concede this point, that you were wrong, and that in terms of international law, let's not move around in circles, because I want to move on to October 7th, that in terms of international law, the Palestinians have the right to resist in terms of international law. This is enshrined in the Geneva Conventions. It's enshrined by numerous General Assembly resolutions, and you simply stating that it is not there is just simply willful self-delusion and denial, because you're basically exposing your ignorance. So can you apologize for what you just said on that particular point, that you were wrong? And then we can move on to October 7th.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Have you been to Israel, Yusuf? Tell me.
No, I have not.
Have you been to Palestine? Have you been to Jerusalem?
If I go to Israel, they'll arrest me. If I go to Israel, they'll arrest me. I've called for the total eradication of the state of Israel. They'll arrest me. I cannot go to Israel. They will arrest me.
So you've never been there. You've never been to Israel. You've never been to the occupied territories.
They will. If I enter Israel, they will arrest me. I'm a lawyer in South Africa. If I go to Israel and I land at the David Ben-Gurion airport, they will arrest me. So I cannot go to Israel. And I don't want to be put in dungeons like your particular journalists in the United States that have gone to Israel, young journalists, and they've been arrested and tortured in Israel. What do you say about that? You think someone like me is going to be given kid gloves?
I think you're a coward. You won't go to Israel. You won't know. You don't know. You've never been through a checkpoint. I've been through checkpoints. I know that before October 7th, there was peace. I went there in 2019. I experienced peace. I went to Jericho and I saw Palestinians selling their goods to American tourists, and there was total peace before that. There was I didn't see anybody. Let me talk. I didn't see anybody shooting anybody at checkpoints. I didn't see any Palestinians being wrestled to the ground or kids throwing rocks. I didn't see that. And the media blows that up. So the way I understand it is from being there as my testimony, you won't let me talk because you're an idiot. You need to let me talk.
So you're calling me an idiot for not
yes, you're an idiot because you won't let me talk. Why don't you let me talk? You're a coward. You won't go to Israel. You've never been to Israel. You don't even know what you're talking about. You've never seen a checkpoint. You've never been through a checkpoint. You don't know anything about Israel. All you do is you mouth off that the ICC has some very important power in the world, and that the Palestinians, even though they might have a right to self-determination, the Hamas has screwed up their country. Hamas has ruined it for Hezbollah has ruined it. They have caused the genocide. They're hiding behind civilians.
Are you done?
Hamas and Hezbollah, they're hiding behind civilians. They hide in tunnels, and the only way Israel can attack them is by blowing up the civilian facilities. And unfortunately, there's innocent civilians that get caught. Now, to stop the war, there's a very simple thing that could happen. All they have to do is release the hostages and stop shooting rockets into Israel and get it to go back to where it was in 2019 when I visited. And the tourists love Israel. They love the Palestinian areas. If they would just go back to having resorts along the Mediterranean coast there in Gaza, they would have a lot of tourists coming in. But instead, they chose war. They chose Hamas. They chose Hezbollah, and now we got a war. And you want to stop it? There's some really simple things to stop the war, and that would be stop shooting rockets into Israel and lay down your weapons.
You done?
So that's it.
Are you done? Okay. Yeah. So I don't want you to run away. I don't want you to run because you had a mouthful of falsehood.
I'm not running away. I'm here.
Yeah. So be there. Stick there. Right. Firstly, let me just point this out. You said you were there in 2019. If you were there in 2019, I don't know how true it is, and I'll take your word for it that you were there.
I can send you a picture.
Okay, that's fine. I take your word for it. In 2019 and in 2018, there was this situation here. Where are we? I just want to basically show you something. This is a report. These are documented. Can you show this on the screen? This is a report. There's something in 2018 and 2019 which was called the Great March of Return. You've got it on the screen, Brother Mohammed. And as you can see here, this is the United Nations. So I'm not making it up. It's the Human Rights Council of the United Nations. This is the independent documents. What happened? Can you see this on the screen? What basically happened is that in the 2018-2019 Great March of Return, this is essentially a peaceful protest, a peaceful march by Palestinians to the Great Walls occupying Israel because of the fact that essentially these were lands that their grandfathers and great-grandfathers were kicked out and ethnically cleansed and dumped into the squatter camps and the concentration camps of Gaza. And so symbolically, as a gesture in Gaza, all of them made weekly and on every Friday at the very least, peaceful protests to the wall, to the actual fence that is by Israel, and essentially stating that we need our particular rights back. We need to go back to the homes where we essentially went to. And what the United Nations documented, the UN Commission inquiry, that Israeli snipers were deployed on the separation fence to police the protest, the Great March of Return, and they shot over 6,000, deliberately shot over 6,106 demonstrators. They killed 183 between 30 March 2018 and 31 December 2018. You then have a situation that, poets, journalists, boys as young as 15.
Yusuf, yes. Can we just pause there? Ask Matt, what month did he actually go in 2018?
Well, what month did you go?
November.
Because this is 30th March to 31st December. What month
November
did you go?
2019, I was there.
Oh, so you went after the Great March of Return. So you stated that the situation was fully peaceful before October 7th. I'll give you, it's been declared that the year before October 7th, that is 2022, 2023, was the deadliest year for children who were shot dead in the West Bank in a decade of violence being committed by Israel. So it was Israeli settlers, the IDF, and Israeli police targeting children. Some of these kids threw stones at the Israeli settlers. They were shot dead. But here you have a situation which is documented, which you probably obviously don't know about. It's the United Nations Human Rights Council. They did a comprehensive commission of inquiry. You can check the report. It's about a 100-page documented report for the individual cases where these people weren't part of Hamas and weren't part of any kind of militant resistance. This was a peaceful Gandhian-like protest stating that they've got the rights to go back to their homes and they should be afforded the same rights as Israelis. And they were shot dead in cold blood. In one instance, they were shooting them on the knees, paralyzing them, killing them. So clearly, you're not familiar with this particular point. So before I move on to your next allegation of human shields, would you be bold enough now in condemning this particular action by the IDF, which was under the basis of command responsibility? And don't jump, I'm talking about this particular incident and this report of an inquiry on the 2018 protests in the occupied Palestinian territories. Will you be bold enough in condemning this? This was released on 18th of March 2019 and 28th of February 2019. So I don't know which month you went, but at the time that you went to Israel, this report was already there where you claimed that you were in a peaceful environment and everybody was kumbaya and happy with each other. Will you condemn Israel for the Great March of Return killings?
I don't know anything about that. I can't talk to it, so I won't speak to it.
Ignorant. Well, now you do. So now that you know about it, will you condemn it? Now that you
do you acknowledge that it was peaceful in 2019, November of 2019, that there was love and peace and going on? See, you won't acknowledge that there was peace going on. There wasn't anybody throwing rocks. You just want to talk over me and you won't let me talk. See, you're just totally ignorant. You never been to Israel. You don't know anything about Israelis and how they want peace. You call for the destruction of Israel, and you're a crazy man. I just can't believe you would say that. That's absolutely stupid. You're promoting the genocide of people when you advocate for the destruction of Israel. That's crazy. You can't say that on public air. You shouldn't say that in media. You are just causing more hatred and more death by doing that. You're perpetuating a bad situation and you're making it worse.
Talk. I'm not like one of you. Where did I say that Israeli civilians must be killed? What did I call for?
You told me you would be arrested because you call for the annihilation of Israel. Didn't you say that?
The dismantlement of the state of Israel. Is that killing Israeli civilians?
What does that mean? That's calling dismantle Israel is the same thing as destroying it. That's terrible.
I tell you what it means?
How can you say that publicly? You should be arrested. You're an advocate of war.
Don't lie, man.
You should be arrested. You shouldn't be able to say that. Anybody who calls for the destruction of Israel should be in jail.
State of Israel. You know why? Do you know why? In the same way,
because you're an evil person. When you're evil, you say evil things.
You support killing of Palestinian civilians, and you calling me an evil person?
I don't call for the destruction of Palestine. I want peace. You call for the destruction of Israel, and you are just promoting more anger, more hatred, and more deaths. That's terrible for you to say that. I just can't believe you say that.
Matt, I just want to say something, if you don't mind. Brother Yusuf, I just want to mention something. Matt was wrong in his statement regarding the arrest warrant for Bush. He didn't want to own up to that. He also mentioned previously that he doesn't think the Palestinians have a right to exist in that land. And also he is saying the state of Palestine, there's no country that is named Palestine, but when you go to any type of information on the internet, the Palestinian